Hey friends, I I'm having something come to me today. I was something that I came across on a leadership retreat. It was just a term that one of the speakers used to describe their approach to problem solving and their approach to essentially sort of a commitment to the work they do. And the phrase was impatient steadfastness. And the reason it came up for me, there's a couple of reasons in my own life. There are ways in which this applies. But it also gave language to something that I feel like I already kind of intuitively have this, or at least in certain domains of my life, I know what this means, and I sort of have a kind of an approach that I think approximates what this speaker meant by impatient steadfastness. So I mean, the term is kind of self-explanatory, but there's a sense of the impatient part is the not letting ourselves be satisfied, always remaining with a slight sense of urgency, looking ahead to where we want to go, right? Not allowing ourselves to be complacent, to be too relaxed, really having a sense of this is an intention, this is a direction I want to go, I want to go there, and things that get in the way, or events, circumstances that slow me down, I'm gonna feel an urgency to move through them. The second half of the phrase, steadfastness, signals to me a long-term commitment and a sense that it's almost like an oxymoron, because impatience, if we think of the term impatience as it's normally used, we would define that as an unwillingness to wait the amount of time that is required for things to happen. And it's usually not used in a positive way. It's usually used, it has negative connotations, because we don't want to wait for things. We want them to happen now. We want things that are happening slowly to happen quickly, right? Wherever we're trying to get to, we want to get there sooner. And the steadfastness aspect of this principle tells us, okay, so you've got urgency, you've got the drive to move, but will you stick with this forever, essentially, or at least as long as it takes to get to where you actually want to go, to get to allow this journey to fully happen? And I like that there's a bit of a tension in the term, like a friction between the two halves of the phrase. I like that they're almost irreconcilable, or at least they each term stretches the other one as far as what it means to be unified into one phrase. I think that's a good thing. I think that's actually a kind of a linguistic encapsulation of how the feeling in our body really ought to feel, because we need both. We're going to be, sometimes we're going to need to lean into the steadfastness half of that term. In other words, breathe. If things aren't happening as fast as we want them to, and that's becoming frustrating, settle down. Look ahead without needing to be there, but be willing to be committed to getting there. If things are going almost off track or in a different direction, recall where it is we're trying to go. really kind of steadfast commitment to what we're trying to make happen. Sometimes we might need to lean into the impatience a little bit. If it is possible, I think, to get so comfortable with a long-term view that we assume that at some point we'll get there, but we're not being super rigorous about marking progress now. And that means that we might even lose sight of the fact of whether or not we're really making progress, right? We're sort of, we know it's a long-term goal. We know it's going to take a while to get there. And therefore, it almost becomes like an alternate reality that we assume will one day arrive, but we're not in this moment now marking our progress towards it. We don't know exactly the thing we're going to do today that's going to get us at least one step further down the road. That might be a time when we have to lean into the impatience or impatient, the impatience half of the term, because we still need that, right? We do need the push. We need the willingness to step up and do something now without it, even if the long-term goal remains a long way off. And this comes up for me. I've spoken a number of times in the last few weeks about working with my daughter on violin. And man, when you're working with a 5-year-old on something terribly complicated and quite difficult, very nuanced, very subtle, lots of micro adjustment, micro attention, and in this case, this is her practice. I'm talking about all of this manifests in my own practice as well. But I notice it with her because I can just get such strong pushback from her from time to time. And every once in a while, the pushback will be so strong that I'm like, oh God, what are we even doing? What's that? What are we doing? What am I doing? Am I pushing this so hard because of my agenda for her to be a musician? Not a professional musician. I'm not that kind of parent. But do I have my own thing that I'm trying to impose on her, and that's why I'm getting pushback? Or is this just a very difficult thing? And at age 5, you need someone to help you stick with it long enough to get to the successes that make it really feel satisfying. And every single time I have a moment of doubt like that, I almost usually right after that, there's a moment of like yesterday. We were practicing yesterday, and we started out, and I thought we were in a nice settled place to start from. And the first thing I suggested, she was like, "No, I don't want to do it." And I was like, "Oh God, okay, here we go." So we talked. We sort of like made a game where we were gonna like each be in charge for a minute. She was gonna be the teacher. I was gonna be the teacher. Which really, she didn't really even want to be the teacher, but just having that, being empowered to not do what I said sometimes was enough to like allow her to kind of trade off between like sometimes she gets to say what we're doing and sometimes I get to say what we're doing. And once we started that, she learned an entire page of music, a page and a half of music, in one sitting, in one 15-minute work session. It was insane. And so the satisfaction that she gets from that, and that she will also get when she gets to play that for her teacher, and that she'll also get when she gets to play that for her friends or on a recital or whatever, that level of joy, which she just thrives with, is one that I kind of had to help her get there, right? Like she might not have done that on her own. And my whole orientation towards this is like, okay, when do I need to be impatient? When do I need to say, here's what we're doing now, or here's what, you know, we're even if it's just a one single bar, one single phrase, a couple of notes, let's start there. Where do I need to be impatient? And where do I need to be steadfast? Where do I need to say, okay, my main job right now is simply to hold the space for this activity to happen. Not to make it happen, not to want it to happen, not to need it to happen in any particular way or at any particular speed, simply to be present and create space for it to happen. And, you know, it's interesting because I think about parents sometimes. I think about so many people that I've met as a music teacher. I've met reams and reams and reams of people who say, my gosh, I wish I hadn't quit the X instrument, whatever they played, but my parents let me quit. I wish they hadn't let me quit, you know? And I have this, I always have the same reaction, which is like, it's such a shame to feel like you had an opportunity and it wasn't, for whatever reason, the conditions were not right for you to come to fruition in a particular way or on a particular instrument at a particular time. But it's such a shame to feel like you quit when a deeper part of you that you were going to make contact with later in life really deeply wanted to learn this. Right? That's kind of what that's the experience of looking back on our life and being like, I have it. For my own musical practice, I have it because I put it down at one point, said I was going to no longer take piano lessons for several years. And I look back at that and I'm like, oh man, why did I do that? That was silly. A deeper part of myself that I connected with later in life was like, okay. And, you know, luckily I had enough background, and then I had enough opportunity and dedication to pick it up again and actually kind of make it, you know, a central aspect of my life. But I often, in the work that I'm doing with Annalise, feel like I'm in that place with her. There's a deep, deep part of her that is passionate about this, that loves this work, that loves playing music, that has such a gift for it. Her ear. I'm learning so much about how a violinist's ear develops, because I don't have a violinist's ear. I have a pianist's ear, and a violinist's ear is another animal. It is a sharp, sharp instrument, and she's got it. Even after just, you know, year and a half of playing, her ear is another level. And I feel like I'm in this role of the friction that I feel in myself is probably partly my own friction. But it's also the friction she's feeling, the difficulty she's feeling, the challenge that she's feeling, and that at her age, she doesn't have the ability to say, I'm going to stick with this because I can see the long-term picture and I know that it's about impatient steadfastness. And, you know, she's 5. So I have to create that frame. I have to be the one to put the membrane around the practice and say, we're going to hold this practice in this way. And it feels like that's the service. That's what I'm supposed to do. That's the job. And it will undoubtedly change as she gets older. But But for now, that impatient steadfastness, which is almost like a spectrum, if impatience is over here, steadfastness, it's like we need to drift wherever we need to keep the practice going, happening, breathing, living. And then over time, it just expands. Everything gets deeper, wider, and more incredible. So it's my reflection on a term for the day. Thanks for watching, folks. I appreciate you. Have a wonderful day. I'll see you soon.